So, welcome everyone to our October edition of the EBS Committee's Roundtable presentation. Today's presentation will focus on, as can be seen here in the title, recommendations for increasing rapport and telepresence during telehealth interactions with youth and families. Some quick housekeeping things before we get into introductions. If you have signed up today for CEUs, back it up. A big thank you to CAMD and Manoa School of Social Work for helping sponsor that aspect for these free CEUs. Whichever email you use to register for today's roundtable, please be on the lookout for a feedback survey that we will be sending to you at that specific email address, your registered email address. If you have signed up to receive CEUs, the CEUs will be awarded based on both your time in the webinar today and your completion of the forthcoming survey. However, whether or not you have signed up to receive CEUs, we'd greatly appreciate if you could fill out the forthcoming survey to give us feedback on the quality of today's webinar. We'll be sending out more information about that at the end as well, as a friendly reminder. In terms of formal introductions, the two major presenters, two of the four major presenters today, we have Tristan Mayasaka and Austin Taylor Matro. Ms. Mayasaka and Ms. Matro are doctoral students in the clinical psychology program at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. They're clinical staff members there at the Center for Cognitive Behavioral Therapy and have provided telemental health services for various youth referred by both the Department of Health and the Department of Education. They have developed considerable telehealth experiences, both in evidence-based assessment and treatment, particularly in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. Our other presenters, our other discussants at the towards the end of the presentation, we have the pleasure of having Mrs. Corinne Garcia. Corinne has a Master of Science in Counseling Psychology degree from Chaminade University and is the Program Director for Catholic Charities, their 13101 program. In addition to her role as the Program Director, she also carries a caseload and provides 13101 therapy services. We also have a parent that Corinne will introduce now. Is that okay, Corinne? Say a few words. And or Cindy can introduce herself as well.
So today with me, I have Cindy Walsh. She is actually a resource caregiver, and we have been working with each other since March 3rd of 2020. We, our kiddo that she's caring for is, well, Cindy, you can talk a little bit about him.
So the child that I care for, he has gone through a tremendous amount of trauma within the little years that he is alive. He's the age of 6 and he's seen more things than I've seen in my adult life, my child life, my whole life technically. And Corinne is really great with helping me with parenting and the intensive home and all that fun stuff. So I'm really grateful to have her.
So particularly warm welcome and deep note of appreciation and gratitude to Cindy and Corinne. As I was sharing with them just before the start of this, we resoundingly and routinely get feedback that people, participants enjoy lived experience, testimonies, and people weighing in at the end. So thank you very much, Cindy and Corinne. Everyone will look forward to what you guys have to say. Which kind of brings us to the tail end of housekeeping in terms of setting the course for today. The presentation from Tristan and Austin will be about 45 minutes. Then I have about 5 minutes. Trina Orimoto from CAMD gave me some slides to present on some preliminary results from CAMD's consumer survey for CAMD's consumer survey effort and looking at preferences for telemental services and whatnot. And then, so 45 minutes, 5 minutes, and then the rest of the time we'll turn it over to Corinne and Cindy. So without further ado, turning it over to Tristan and Austin.
Thank you very much, Brad. So like Dr. Nakamura mentioned, we work for the Center for Cognitive Behavioral Therapy and have been receiving referrals for treatment from the Department of Health for a number of years. And during this time of our collaboration, we've had the privilege of conducting telemental health practices for our families. So today we are excited to talk to you about some of the considerations and strategies that we've implemented in our own work at the CCPT. These considerations are based on our previous years of experience as well as information we've gathered during this time as COVID has developed. Before we begin, I'd like to apologize. If you attended our July 16th Department of Education training, you will find that this presentation significantly overlaps with that one. However, one takeaway from that is that our suggestions largely remain the same several months into this pandemic. I would like to stress that these are not hard and fast rules. We are really humbly offering our thoughts with the understanding that some of what we cover will probably be more helpful than some of the others. And we have found them important considerations for our work and hope that some of the things that we discussed today can be helpful for you as well. So our objective is to provide like a modest, broad overview of things related to conducting telehealth for practitioners by describing evidence-informed procedures and practices adapted by our Center for Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. Just want to take a pause before we really get into the meat of this and just encourage you guys that you guys can do this. We are several months into this pandemic, and I'm sure as many of our therapists have felt, and maybe as you felt as well, just maybe surprised by your own strength and how you're able to adapt to this new time. Several thoughts that we at the clinic had as we are going into this COVID experience has been, how do we deal with suicidal thoughts? How do we manage the risks that we are now facing? How do we make sessions fun and engaging? How do we keep our momentum in treatment? And so if you had any of those thoughts, that's nice for us to know, because that means we weren't alone in this as well. And so really, as a whole learning CUI, we are moving forward during this time. And we are really excited to share some of the things that we've come across in our endeavors. So our presentation today will be in two parts, or Tristan and I's two parts. The first, my part, will cover telehealth considerations. And the second, Tristan will outline recommendations to improve telepresence. So 3 broad themes to consider when doing telemental health are around goodness of fit, safety, and maximizing positive impact. So the first one, goodness of fit, our guiding question really here is, are telehealth services right for this individual or their family at this time? So the first thing, there's many considerations under this wide umbrella of goodness of fit. The first thing we are going to discuss is technology and setting. Important to note that when we say telepractice, we are referring to both audio as well as visual. So kind of what we're doing today via Zoom or whatever platform your agency is using at this time. We do understand that for some families, audio is the only way to go. We at the clinic try our best to keep it audio as well as visual because, as you may have already experienced during this time, some of the things can get lost when you don't have eyes on your client or your family. And so we really at the clinic try to maximize our chances of doing telepractice audio visual. The first thing I'd like to kind of discuss in terms of considerations for technology and setting is the appropriate hardware, software knowledge. So this is, do your families have computers? Do they have a laptop or a cell phone that has a camera, that has good microphones? Like, are you actually able to conduct teleservices based on the technology available to your families? Next is software. Does your family have Zoom or whatever platform that your agency is using on those devices? So at the clinic, we use Zoom. And so while we're doing our practices, we make sure that our families have laptops or cell phones or iPads, as well as Zoom on those devices. The next thing is knowledge. So while it's really important that they have those devices, and it's really important that they have those applications, the next thing you need to consider is whether or not they know how to use those applications, and be able to kind of troubleshoot with them. Do you, as a provider, know how to help them if they're stuck? I've had to learn this during this time, just how to guide our families through using Zoom, what the different icons mean, why it could be that they're no longer on this screen, and trying to guide them back. For our own, like, what do you do when we can hear them but we can't see them, or we can see them but we can't hear them, just troubleshooting all of that. So one of the things that you as a clinician have to consider is whether or not your client and their family has the appropriate devices, as well as the software, as well as the knowledge. And do you have all of those as well to be able to not only conduct your services, but also help them if they have any trouble. The next thing is internet security and strength. So if you are like me and maybe have a room further away from your household modem and router, you might know that internet security and strength is super important. At the beginning of your sessions, you might want to check in with your client in terms of security. Is their internet password protected? Is their internet secure? At this point in COVID, I think most of us have a relative idea of how strong our internet is, and we can kind of figure out our own makeshift troubleshoot ways to improve our internet strength, either by moving closer to the modem or the router. Sometimes all it takes is turning your Wi-Fi off and on. And so another thing to consider in terms of whether or not it is appropriate to conduct telemental health at this time. The next thing is just to have a safe and reliable place to do your telemental health services. So for example, you can kind of see behind me that there's no one behind me, it's quiet. So on my end, I try to make sure that I'm in a place where no one can overhear, no eavesdropping, as well as for the client, making sure that they're in a place where they feel safe. Some of the things that you might be talking about are things that might be difficult for them to share, and it might be adding to the difficulty if there are potentially people eavesdropping, or there's potentially just different distractions going on. So under the big umbrella of technology and setting, these are the three things that we are offering as things to consider. This kind of brings me to an example in my own work as an intensive in-home therapist. So like I mentioned before, and people, if you knew me, you would know that I'm not very tech savvy. And so I've had to learn during this time and how to use Zoom and how to troubleshoot everything, because one of my caregivers that I was working with would spend maybe the first half an hour of our sessions just trying to figure Zoom out. And so during this time, I had to really learn how to use Zoom. And you can kind of imagine if you have anyone in your clinic or in your agency or just a friend who's really good at explaining Zoom. I had my co-therapist who's really good at Zoom and technology explain to me and coach me how she coaches her clients. And that was one way that we were able to engage with our caregivers some more via telemental health, because we no longer spent half an hour troubleshooting things. I got really good at explaining the different icons, like, oh, click the icon that kind of looks like a camera, or click the icon that looks like a microphone. Oh, okay, that's not working. All right, we're trying to just log off, log back in really quick. Oh, so good, we can see you now. Awesome. All right, let's get going. So those are, if you have that resource of someone who's really knowledgeable, that's awesome. You can also look at YouTube videos to see how people have explained Zoom. The next thing that we would like you to, that we're offering as a consideration is just taking into consideration the youth and family characteristics. So for example, for the youth, is there any potential psychopathology that might get in the way of conducting telemental health? We're thinking youth with high-end ADHD that cannot sit down and look at a screen for more than a couple minutes. And so those are some things you have to consider. It's not necessarily saying you can't do telemental health practices with them, but then how are you as a creative and intelligent service provider going to problem solve this? It might be that you create a system like a game, or you might work with the family members in trying to create an environment for them or a schedule with them that can maximize your time with your youth. Recently, I was reading an article, a research article that also mentioned that maybe you consider shortening your sessions. You know, you don't really need to go the whole hour if you don't think you're going to get it. And so some things just to consider when you're doing telemental health. Along those lines, potential distractions. You probably know families with more than one child. I come from a family of more than one child. And so during those times, like where you have maybe multiple siblings, multiple youth, all within one home, and then potentially a smaller home, how are you going to try to keep your youth engaged? Something to consider would be like siblings running around. Or the other day, I had a younger sibling like bolt right into the room while I was doing a telemental health practice. And so how do you troubleshoot that? And so just, again, not saying that a lot of siblings is a reason not to do telepractice, but things to consider. And just when you start to formulate how you're going to work with this family. So we've covered technology and setting, youth and family characteristics. The next thing is informed consent. Informed consent, we take this pretty seriously at the clinic. We want to make sure that, especially during this time where there's so much uncertainty, that our families understand what our services are going to look like, how we are going to be addressing safety, and how conducting telemental health practices is different from doing in-person services. So these things, some of the questions that we considered while creating our consents is just, can we get youth clients and families just on board with our typical general procedures? This is what our first, like, these are the basic things, like talking to us about some of their challenges, how they're feeling. Can we get them on board with that? Can we efficiently and clearly apprise them of the potential risks and benefits of participating in telemental health? Can we get them on board with our safety protocols? So I know safety might be a big thing in many of your minds, and so I'm going to get to safety separately, but yes, these are some of the things that we considered in terms of creating informed consent. What this looked like specifically for our clinic is that we revamped what our typical welcome meetings look like to include components of telemental health. So for example, we list, during our welcome meeting, so that's the first meeting we have with families, we list some of the potential risks, such as privacy, confidentiality, potentially missing things during our sessions. Sometimes we might not have the ability to like respond completely in the moment. There might be a delay on my side. So maybe if you're sharing something very emotional, maybe my face won't properly change the way I would typically like it to while you give that information. But then we also share some of the benefits as well. So flexibility with scheduling. I don't have to drive from different home to different home. And so my schedule is a little bit more flexible, a little bit more open to be able to meet with different families. Like I mentioned again, like potential increase of frequency of sessions and brief check-ins. So just 15 minutes, half an hour instead of the full hour, just checking in, seeing how they're doing, and that's great. In addition, we share that research so far has shown that telemental health services is just as effective as in-person sessions. And then we have this new opportunity to like rope in different technological services, such as sharing documents, like I'm sharing my presentation right now, instead of maybe just doing paper, things like that, typing as they're speaking. So there's definitely some new pros and cons, risks and benefits of conducting telemental health. And this is what we include in our welcome meeting for the clinic. So the next thing we're going to discuss are intervention goals. So is it possible for you to achieve your treatment goals in the telemental health format? So for example, I'm working with an anxiety client that I have to do exposure with. That would be a little difficult in the telemental health setting. So we've actually worked out a way for us to meet in person following safety protocols, so with masks and everything, but another thing to consider. The next thing is safety, and safety is so important that I'm actually going to have it be an actual section in its own. So guiding question here is, do I have a plan in place for various potential safety concerns? Again, number of considerations. The first one we're going to go into is just getting emergency safety information, and then your plan regarding significant disruptions. So now, because we are working remotely, some of the necessary information that we get from clients at the beginning is their physical address, where they are. So if they are in need of any emergency services, we can contact emergency services and direct them to the home. We also find out where the nearest hospital is to them, as well as exchange contact numbers. For those of you who are feeling a little bit uncertain about whether or not you want to give out your personal cell phone number to your client, there are some resources for forwarding numbers, such as Numfix, Google Voice, Sideline, and TextNow. Specifically for significant disruptions, what we do at the clinic is if there's a significant disruption, such as the phone dropping and then we can't see them for a while, or internet cuts out and they freeze, or they leave the Zoom, we ask families to immediately try to contact us, just letting us know that they are okay, and immediately trying to log back on. If we don't hear back from them within a minute, we call that emergency contact number that we've received, just to verify that they're okay. And then if we don't hear from them in 10 minutes, then we will reach out to emergency services ourselves. And this is because safety is our #1 priority. Next thing is youth suicidal and homicidal ideation. Understanding that this might be a big concern for many of the providers today, because you aren't physically in the same room as your client. Largely the CCBT's procedures are largely the same as we approach this, because what we do is broken down into 2 big steps. One, diligently assessing for risk, and appropriately responding to that level of risk. So for example, for one of my cases, the client was referred because of self-harm behaviors. And so very early on, we did a risk assessment, just our basic risk assessment, and then immediately conducted a safety plan, or created a safety plan with her, and then invited her to bring in her caregiver, and then we went through the safety plan together. And so that is still going through, our good training of assessing for safety as soon as we are thinking that that might be a risk, and then following through with safety planning, as well as bringing in other agencies if you need to. So if you need to call CWS or 911, those are still options. Okay, the next thing that we want to consider is unsafe home environments. So another thing that we assess early on is any potential of unsafe environments. And then also place some safeguards if necessary. For us, a potential safeguard would be if we can create what we call a safety code, a signal code, with our families. So one of the families I work with, their safety code is, oh, I gotta go cook rice. And so when they tell me, oh, I gotta go cook rice, that means that something has happened in their home, they no longer feel safe and they want me to contact emergency services. So we've gone over a lot in terms of goodness and fit and safety. We've gone over technology and setting, youth and family characteristics, informed consent, intervention goals, and safety itself. And so hopefully after you've considered all of this, you're feeling good and you want to progress towards treatment. So in this way, how do you maximize your positive impact with your families? The guiding question here is, how can I make this session as beneficial to the client and family as possible? So key considerations here are just counseling goals and telepresence. In terms of counseling goals, what we do is a careful reassessment of treatment goals throughout this whole thing, understanding that during this time, people and families might be stressed and they are dealing with different stressors than they might have been at the start of services. So what we do at the clinic is frequent check-ins and very frequent and specific check-ins with our youth as well as our family, asking them how are they feeling with COVID lasting this long. You know, some of the family members some of the families that we're working with right now thought that COVID would be over, thought that life would be kind of back on track. And sometimes they're dealing with added disappointment that it's not. Sometimes they're dealing with losing a job, losing a financial resource. And so specific check-ins in terms of, hey, how are you doing with all of this? Are you feeling more stress? How are you dealing with that stress? That has been helpful in just starting those honest conversations and then just adapting that, hey, things might have changed. And that is completely okay. It is with no, without blame that they might be dealing with different things. And even though even though treatment right now is not targeting the exact reason for referral or the reason that services first began, that you are still answering and meeting the families where they're at. The next thing that that we're going to talk about is telepresence. And this is such a big and broad thing that we're actually doing the second part of the presentation. So Tristan will now talk about how to maximize your telepresence.
Okay, thanks, Austin. And so in this first half, we were going over things that we have done in our own practice and I guess are offering it as considerations. Whereas in my section now, I'll go over a literature review by Henry et al., who summarized different recommendations more broadly for providers regarding how to make telepresence more effective. And so these could be summarized into 6 themes. So these are the pre-interactional, verbal communication, nonverbal communication, relational, environmental, and educational themes. So before I even get into it, I first want to recognize that you all have likely developed varying levels of expertise in your telehealth delivery. So I encourage you all to use the chat feature, the chat feature to recommend other strategies or tools that you might have found helpful in your practice as we go through these different recommendations. So the first theme is the pre-interactional phase, and here I'll be describing things that you may want to consider before even conducting your telehealth sessions. So these include your own attitudes, confidence, beliefs, competencies, and cultural awareness before going into service delivery. And so you might think to yourself, what do I think about telehealth more broadly? Do I think that telehealth can be effective? And then lastly, how confident am I in my ability to conduct telehealth? Our first recommendation then is to aim to achieve a positive viewpoint regarding telehealth and to also be mindful of your own biases. So as Austin previously mentioned, the research in this area indicates that outcomes when comparing telepractice to in-person service delivery, they tend to be pretty equivalent. With the caveat that this effect is moderated, so moderated meaning being affected by the extent to which a telehealth provider feels comfortable delivering these services. And so we recommend that you really reflect on how the benefits of telemental health can outweigh the drawbacks. Think deeply about how your own biases and discomfort with telehealth or the technologies may influence how you conduct telepresence or telehealth. And then lastly, to discuss these things or these issues with your colleagues or supervisors as needed before you even jump into providing services. Okay, so the second theme, the verbal communication theme, will focus on how to maximize verbal communication, or in other words, the things that we say and then how we say them. So again, research in this area suggests that there tends to be a lot less small talk and praise, which essentially can really damage rapport with your client as well as therapeutic alliance. And so we also know that technical language and jargon can make this problem even worse. So think to yourself, maybe what are some of the verbal communication strategies that I normally employ? And then how can I adapt these into my telehealth sessions effectively? So our second recommendation is to continue with consistent check-ins, and then also what we like to call leave them laughing strategies at the end of session. And so these include activities or check-ins that elicit positive verbal communication with your clients. So for example, you might ask your client to maybe teach you something about the technology that you're using, or maybe encourage them to screen share, I don't know, like a document, a drawing, even a video that they're interested in. We're also going to go over some online games that you might consider using, but we do want to provide the caveat that you do want to, I guess, avoid these mass online player games, like those where you may choose a character and play in some sort of virtual world, because these sort of activities don't really facilitate good interpersonal interactions. So we're going to recommend and ask that you try to stick to more simple games. Okay, and so again, many of you might already be doing these activities. So in the chat, please feel free to suggest other games and activities that might be useful for other people's telepractice. But some of the things that we've tried have been Kahoot, which is sort of this online trivia style game. Some other recommendations similar to that have been Jeopardy Labs, where you answer Jeopardy style questions, and Scribble.io, which is sort of like a Pictionary game. You could also use Screen Share to use the whiteboard feature, as well as a word generator to play more traditional games like charades and Pictionary, or Snowman, which is the less morbid version of Hangman. Again, you can have a student screen share a game that they're interested in playing, and you can take turns with them doing this. Some other activities that we've tried have been to read online jokes to each other or ask each other would you rather questions. So essentially anything that promotes verbal communication. Okay, and our third recommendation is to maintain the same level or even more of small talk and praise during your session. So first, we recommend that you be really, really mindful about how often you're engaging in small talk and praise. And so for those of you that might find this more challenging, I urge you to keep tallies, maybe recording the frequency of praise statements you make during a session, and then set goals and challenge yourself to stick to those goals for increasing your small talk and praise. Some other things that you could do maybe might be to take turns in engaging in some sort of show and tell activity, or maybe even commenting on things in your student's background or home if they're comfortable. Just for example, when the pandemic first started, I worked with these caregivers who had attached this really beautiful painting to the back of their wall, and I think that was a great session because I started off by saying, wow, what an amazing photo that you have there, and they told me that they had put it there just for our Zoom meetings. So I think even that sort of small talk goes a really long way when making your telepractice more effective and engaging. Okay, and fourth, as mentioned previously, again, use simple and clear language. Avoid jargon or really anything that can be confusing for your clients. As a final note regarding verbal communication, consider even using the text or chat features as maybe like a bridge toward verbal communication for those youth that are more reluctant to speak, like our anxious or shy kids. And a last point, as sort of like a takeaway, is that in general, video conferencing is not an ideal environment for verbal communication. I think this is even evident here where, you know, I'm speaking and you guys are all muted, whereas maybe in a face-to-face presentation, there might be more discussion and interaction with the audience. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is back and forth conversation really doesn't come naturally in telehealth sessions. So make sure to make it a point to increase verbal communication by any means you can. Okay, next we'll be going into the nonverbal communication. So these are the things that you do with your body to indicate that you're listening and understanding. So these include things like using eye contact, empathetic gestures, adjusting your voice quality, your tone, as well as using visual cues during your sessions. And our fifth recommendation is then to maximize your nonverbal patterns of communication. And so this may include things like making sure that you're in full view and that the view is able to capture these nonverbal signals, such as hand gestures, like waving hello and goodbye to your clients, maybe giving them virtual high fives. One thing that I do is, you know, I talk with my hands a lot. And so I allow these gestures to appear on camera, because even if it might be sort of weird for you, it will appear more natural for your clients, especially if that's something that they've been used to you doing in person. And then lastly, combine your verbal communication recommendations with your nonverbal cues to really maximize their efficiency. Okay, so some other recommendations to maximize your nonverbal communication. One, for younger children, it might be a good idea to use props or puppets, especially for those youth who have a difficult time maintaining focus. You could use a prop as sort of like a game to engage them throughout your meeting. So for example, you might introduce to your client like, hey, we're gonna play this game with Mr. Lion. Throughout session, I'm gonna turn off the camera and turn it back on. And when I do, I want you to find out where he's hiding. Sort of like that elf on the shelf game. And by doing that, you're kind of keeping your client excited and engaged and wanting to attend to the session, even though it might be a little bit harder via camera. So another thing that you might want to consider is using the screen sharing features to project images or files. So for example, in our own practice, we often will share our clinical dashboards with our clients to give our treatment team as well as our families information about our clients' progress, show how our clients are progressing on various measures in a graph. You could also do this with different files or handouts or different websites or whatever you would like to facilitate therapeutic service delivery. Okay, so again, I'm sure that everyone here is an expert at Zoom and at least at some point has used the whiteboard feature or the annotate feature. So this might be sort of preaching to the choir, but really try to utilize these Zoom features to get your clients engaged. And so you might consider using the whiteboard feature to, draw or play those games that I'd mentioned earlier. You could also project a PDF of maybe like a black and white blank drawing and enable the annotate feature where you and your client can simultaneously color together as an activity. Okay, so on a side note, on a cautionary side note, we suggest that you don't watch videos together on YouTube. And the reason for this is because you're already using a lot of bandwidth when video conferencing. And then on top of that, you're using additional bandwidth to run the video and even more bandwidth to transfer that video via screen share to your client. And this can really disrupt your session by causing somebody to lose connection or maybe voice cutting out or video cutting out. So consider letting the youth play the video before you even attend the session so that it's not using that bandwidth, or maybe asking them to download a certain media or image before the session even starts. Okay, and our sixth recommendation for nonverbal communication is to be aware of your equipment quality and placement. Austin sort of touched on this already. We want to make sure that we're in full view. We want to make sure that our camera is in a great place. We want to make sure that we ask our clients' families to make sure that their cameras are in a good place. And so I guess my overall message for nonverbal communication is that nonverbal communication is still important for telepresence. And so even if it might feel awkward to maybe lean into your camera to show that you're listening, or maybe use your hands to convey messages, just do it, because it makes your telepresence a lot more effective. Okay, and so the fourth theme is the relational theme. And this includes rapport and relationship building strategies. So our seventh recommendation is to make sure that you're expressing care and active listening during your sessions and showing a strong collaborative stance. So, maybe some of you have had a similar experience, but at least in my own with telehealth, we came across some problems with an anxious youth who would, be a little bit hesitant in talking. And so we might ask like, oh, are you okay? And she'll say, yeah, I'm fine. But you can tell that she's really not okay. And so we would use check-in questions, the ones that we mentioned earlier, to open-endedly ask, like, how was your day? How's mom and dad doing? And I think these sort of questions can really go a long way in building rapport, because by using your active listening skills, like attending, reflecting, asking for clarification and summarizing, you can really start to pick out, information from your conversations and ask them to expand on it and to elicit more information about these things that might seem difficult for your clients. As a last point, this recommendation is not exclusive to telehealth. These are non-specific therapeutic skills that you would typically be using in your regular practice anyway. But the takeaway message here is to make sure that you protect time for rapport building. It's not going to come as naturally during telehealth. So I think it's a good idea to spend time and making it a point to casually talk with your clients, check in about COVID, and then using your active listening skills to establish and maintain therapeutic alliance. Okay, so the next theme is the environmental theme. And this includes things in your physical surroundings, your client's physical surroundings, as well as privacy during your calls. So our eighth recommendation is to assure that your to assure that the patient privacy and confidentiality extends beyond the transmission of data. So making it clear to your client that you're not using a shared space, that no one is around you, that no one's listening into your call. Another way to even further suggest this to your client, maybe to use headphones like I'm doing right now. Next, you want to make sure that you're being collaborative with your families. So maybe asking the parents to arrange a private or confidential space for your client. Some other things to consider might be, does your youth have a sibling that might eavesdrop? Does everyone in the family know that the youth is receiving therapy services? And some things you might want to suggest to your families would be maybe hanging a do not disturb sign on the door, or even playing music outside of the use door when you're having session. Okay, so we have to be mindful that even if we're not physically inside of their homes, in a sense we are sort of in their homes because we can see their backgrounds, we can see inside of their houses. And so we want to be mindful about this. And again, we're being allowed into our clients' families' houses, and different families may have varying reactions to you being able to see inside. There might be cultural beliefs, concerns about cleanliness, and other things like that that may make families feel sort of uncomfortable about you being able to see inside their house. So one consideration, recommendation might be to ask, what their house rules are. Another feature in Zoom that I'm sure many of you have already used, I see Dr. Nakamura using it right now, are these virtual backgrounds. So you can use them, your client's family can use them. And really what it does is to both liven up your meeting space and then also potentially hide whatever chaos or whatever might be happening in the background. So for example, if a youth is uncomfortable with you seeing inside of their house, help them figure out how to set up a virtual background instead. Okay, and our ninth recommendation is to create a calming or reassuring background during your sessions. So this could include things like adjust the lighting, the background, dress professionally to communicate warmth and professionalism. And some things you might want to think about are, how do I look on the video screen? And does my background look professional and comforting? And lastly, our 10th recommendation for your environment is to keep it as distraction-free as possible. And I recognize this may be really difficult for some folks who are working from home, who have kids who are also working from home. But just think about how it might feel for a client, a vulnerable client who may feel uncomfortable talking about a sensitive topic if they see other kids, running through the background, or maybe other people talking to you as you're trying to have session. So just be really mindful about what's happening around you during your telehealth sessions. Okay, and as a final note, for youth who may have difficulties with inattention or hyperactivity, you may want to recruit your youth's caregiver to find ways to help them stay focused during session. So really quickly, some suggestions for this may be to ask the parent to periodically provide praise or rewards for their child staying seated and engaged during session. You may want to have parents redirect youth to their computer if they get out of their seat, and offer larger rewards at the end of session if they maintain their focus. Okay, and this is our last theme, which is the educational theme. So all of us are still kind of figuring this stuff out as we go, still figuring out ways to provide these services in the best way possible. So our 11th recommendation, or our last recommendation, is to maybe incorporate a satisfaction rating into your sessions. So for example, maybe at the end of session, you might ask, on a scale of 0 through 10, how well do you think we're working to your goals? Or how satisfied are you with the services that we're providing? Really quickly, this continued slide, Scott Miller has a number of these different session rating scales from the student or parent's perspective that you may consider incorporating into your practice. Okay, and then our final recommendation. So this area of study and clinical development still warrants future investment. I don't think any of us have all the right answers. I'm here talking today about some of the things that the research suggests might be helpful and what we have found helpful in our own practice. But again, I'm also really looking forward to reading the chat and learning about what you guys have tried and found helpful as well. I think that everyone will have different experiences with telehealth, and that sharing these experiences with your colleagues will really serve as an awesome learning opportunity for others in the field.
All right. So a couple more minutes, then we're going to turn it over to Corinne and Cindy. Now we're transitioning over to some local data, specifically from the CAMD consumer survey done once a year. This is actually, bless her heart, this is Trina's. Trina sent me some information while on maternity leave, having a brand new baby. With that said, there's a little caveat that I'm presenting on data that I'm not as familiar with. So I'm looking to CAMD partners who would know maybe more about this data than me, but I'll do my best. Trina gave me some information. So now on to some local information, if you will. So the background is that once people may or may not know in the audience here today, once per year, CAMD does its annual consumer survey where they reach out to as many families as feasibly possible to survey them about their experiences with CAMD services. Okay. So it's not as part of a routine feedback mechanism. And this year, I think there were at least a few questions, 4 close-ended questions, or sort of 4 forced choice questions, and a few open-ended questions where families could write out things that they wanted to share. Today, I can share on the close-ended questions, or sort of the categorical questions, and choosing responses. Overall, the numbers I have is that Candy emailed 622 caregivers and reached out to an additional 10 families via phone. And across the phone and email methods, was able to receive back 121 surveys. Okay, so looking at the 121 surveys, here's one of the 4 questions that we're going to share. Asking a parent about their child to this statement: my child was satisfied with telehealth, audio and or video therapy sessions and meetings. And what we see here is that combined, if we're just looking at the strongly agree and agree sentiments, these are percentages: 23% of the 121 and 25.4% of the 121 parents that responded strongly agreed or agreed to the sentence, my child was satisfied with telehealth, audio and or video therapy sessions and meetings. Okay, so try to keep that approximately 50% in mind. Okay, moving on to the next slide. And then when asked specifically to the parent about their experiences, so the parent in their own voice, I was satisfied with my telehealth, that is, I as the parent was satisfied, this number bumps up a little bit more. So again, using the same strategy of combining strongly agree, 30.6% on that top bar, and 33.9% on that second bar, that's a combined 64.5. So just one thing to keep in mind here is that there's a little bit of a differential or a difference. The previous slide, when asked about their child's, asked parents about how much their child liked or didn't like it, that number was about 50% strongly agree or agree, and the parent perspective is 65%. So there's a little bit of a puka or a gap there. Okay, moving on to the next slide, 2 more questions, and I'm going to turn it over to Corinne and Cindy. Now asked specifically, what type of therapy session did your child like best? So again, this is a question to the parent about their child. I think there's a typo on this one down here, voice plus audio. I think that should read visual plus audio. But what we see here is green is telephone only. This bluish color is not sure. The orange is the visual and audio, and gray is in person. So what we can see here is, even with the move to telemental health and the current circumstances in which we're all doing our best, everybody's working hard and trying their best. Parents are reporting that their child, that 44% of parents are reporting that their children still have a preference for face-to-face services. Okay, second place would be visual and audio, and I guess a distant 4th place would be telephone only, with some more votes for not sure. Okay, and then the final question before we turn it over to Corinne and Cindy for initial comments, reactions, thoughts, as well as questions from participants. What type of therapy session did you like best? So this question is specifically to parents, more kind of similar, asking the parents specifically. Parents at this 54% in the gray, more than half of the 121 respondents to the survey, Cambly's consumer survey, did have a preference for in-person session. The orange, 40%, encouragingly, for visual and audio. Nobody was not sure. There were no blue responses, and 7% said telephone or audio only. So on that note, maybe we can end this part of the slideshow, and we can turn it over to the panel, sort of, or we can just end slideshow, or if there's a comment and question piece. We also have here a variety of CAMD staff, including our chief psychologist, our medical director. Thank you. Our EBS committee assistant, who's on mute over there, as well as Dr. Kelsey Okamura. So maybe we can turn it over to Cindy and Corinne. Okay, thank you very much.
Are you looking more for reactions to the presentation, or are we taking questions from?
We can take it however you guys wanna take it. So if you guys are comfortable, if I could, I guess, project, and I'm looking to the rest of the CAMD panel to give me feedback. Maybe where we could start would be Corinne, within your experience as supervisor and therapist, and Cindy within your experience of being a partner on this on the other end of the Zoom line. Maybe we could just start with sharing your initial reactions and your sort of lived experiences with providing this kind of therapy.
For sure. But first of all, Austin and Tristan, you guys did a really great job with your guys' presentation. Very helpful. Definitely could have used that in March before we moved into telehealth. So I hope everyone has an opportunity to be able to check out this presentation. But so basically a lot of the things, everything they said pretty much fits for us. You know, our little one that I work with, Cindy, he's 6 years old. And so very active. So, you know, when we started, we only had 2 face-to-face appointments with the family before we had to move fully into telehealth. And so our very first session was really just kind of talking story about how this is going to work. This is not only first timer for her in therapy, but also, you know, in this, it's telehealth, and it was definitely first for me. So we kind of just talked about what barriers are going to be. We tried out times, what would work best. You know, we did 7 in the morning, 6:30 in the evening, you know, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So we worked out, you know, we gave our time like 2 weeks to see which would work best for us and for the kiddo. I think what worked out the gate was we were consistent about our days. So it's always 2 times a week. And we aimed for you know, 1 day for Cindy and I to do the parenting. And then the second would be for the little guy. And it didn't always work out. The first 2 sessions for the little guy, it was really give him the phone, let him play with it, let him get comfortable. Let's aim for 5 minutes, you know, so we start off with 5, 10, 15, then we can get up to 45 minutes to an hour. So to help keep him grounded, we start off with, you know, you have to be creative. So when they talked about that, so, you know, the place is really decorated with very kid-friendly things, you know, age-appropriate stuff for the little one. But one thing that we start off with for him and I, we do a lot of these animal breath cards. So since March, it's slowly introducing him to different breaths, and we either start off a session with that or we end a session, and it's very consistent. So he knows what to expect. I'm very, I love agendas. So I always start off the session with her, what to expect. You know, I'm sure there's a lot of therapists on here. So, you know, sometimes sessions can be bombarded with cows, crisis of the week. So we save that till the end of the session. But one thing I found helpful for not just Cindy, but with the families is screen sharing of the EBS Help Your Keiki. Seriously, beans, guys, it's so easy. You know, we go over our evidence base and what to expect of me as a therapist and what to expect of the little guy and therapy. That's been super helpful with not just, again, it's Cindy, but for all the families. I start off treatment with that for every family we work with. Cindy, you're way more important today than I am. So maybe you can jump in and share some of your experience.
Yeah, thanks, Corinne. Great job on the presentation. I really appreciate it. And I'm glad to be here today. But like Corinne was saying in the beginning, it was just us getting everything together and just figuring out time. So it was pretty cool having someone to be as flexible. In my household, I currently have 5 children, 5 dogs, 2 rabbits, and a husband. So it gets crazy at times. Corinne's really amazing at, she always prioritizes. So if one day is not working for me and my little guy, then she'll be like, okay, well, I have this day for me and you to meet. And then if little man's not feeling up to it, then she always guides me through it. So if he's going through something, she'll be like, okay, well, maybe not today. And she'll guide me through it on how to help him, instead of just like, oh, well, it's okay, I'll meet with him next time. So she's really amazing at that. And I love how she always texts, hey, how was it today? Do you think he'll be up for it today? And she just goes with it. And she's always, like I said, she prioritizes, she's always organized. She's really organized with, if my guy, he tends to jump. He likes different things. So an example was, Corinne had something set up for them to do in one session, and she had emojis in the back of her. I don't know how he seen it, but he was like, Miss Corinne, what is that? And Corinne just stopped what she was doing, and she went and got it, and she engaged him with that for the day. And so that's what I really love about her. Even as far as if he's not having a good day, she'll engage with him in what he's looking forward to do. So another example is the trampoline. Or if he had cleaned the room, then she'd be like, Nisha, did you clean your room today? And he gets out of whatever mood he's in, and he's like, oh, yes, I did. And he'll take her and he'll show her. And they'll go off of that, and then they'll go, and then she'll slowly ease him into their agenda for the day. And it works great. And yeah, and then other things too that Corinne is amazing with is for me, I really appreciate it. Our family loves her. She reminds me of my strengths and my weaknesses, and that's a really big positive for me. Days that I feel like I'm failing, she'll be like, no, you got this. Let's get back up. Let's go. You can do this. We can do this. She also is very mindful of everyone in the household. So she'll, I have it actually. So she'll give books and stuff to help not only with our little guy, but with all the kids in my household, just to help him. So this is an emotion book, and it's pretty cool because it's for all the kiddos. She's even made like little awards to help me in my household. So I don't know if you guys can see that. It's a paper. Yeah, but it's awards that she helps me with. And it's been amazing. And things that I already do in my household, she always pushes me to take it a step further. So we have children under the age of 12. And I do daily, weekly family meetings. And Corinne was a really big help with that, because she was like, you can do it, Sin, I understand, you just got to engage and all that fun stuff. And so now our house has house core rules. And that's how they get to earn their rewards or stuff out of the treasure bin. And our house core rules are respect, responsible, honest, and caring. If they follow or they show me and my husband like, oh, hey, today's your day. You can get, we noticed you did this, and good job. We do a lot of verbal praising. It helped a lot. As well as distractions. Corinne's really great at distractions. If she noticed that our guy's going off, so she's like, hey, look, what I would, and he's right back with her. I love when she reads to him, because I know sometimes as a parent, I'm just like, oh, well, I'm just gonna read in my regular voice, but Corinne, no matter what mood she's in, she has all different voices, and my kid loves it. And yeah, so that's everything for me.
Thank you very much. Outstanding. We have one question in the Q&A queue from Susan Rocco. Part of my ignorance about this webinar format, I'm not sure if only the panelists can see that question, or if all 111 of you can see the question. But I know the panelists can. So what I'll do is I'll copy and paste it into the chat so everybody can read it. Sorry, I don't know if everybody can, but I'd love to hear Corinne and Cindy's, if they have any thoughts or reactions about that question. Also, from anybody as well in the sort of CAMD panel, Leslie, Kurt, Kelsey, anybody like that. But I'm going to put
Brad, I just want to say everybody can see the Q.
Oh, okay, thanks. So I won't. Thank you very much to save me that step over there. So, but maybe we can turn to Susan's question right now. Maybe Corinne, Cindy, and others, if you could take a second a minute to read that. I think that's a great question. So big picture, that one looks like it's talking about reading nonverbal cues when working with families. So the ability to read the room, read nonverbal cues um, via Zoom telemental health versus in-person therapy. So any thoughts or reactions to that about that being a barrier, not a barrier?
For me, so I've been doing this for almost 16 years. Telehealth is very new again, so for March. For me, I have to say it, it's been okay. It's been easy. My age groups that I work with from are, 5 to 20. Uh, I have to say for me personally, I haven't seen a difference really at all. Is there maybe a situation or something you might want to, or maybe um, to ask? So, I mean, because I don't, with the little guy, I don't, there's probably more nonverbal with the younger ones than not. And so it's really, pointing it out and point and processing it with whatever age actually. So I haven't really seen any difference, either virtual or face-to-face. But another panelist might think differently. So I'm curious to hear that too. To Cindy, do you feel that
Um,
we choose?
yes, Corinne's really great at that. Because when me and Corinne have our session, I always go to a separate room, but once our little guy gets on, like she knows, and so that's how she'll slowly engage him, and she'll just ask him, "How was your day?" And then Corinne, I want to say, is actually the first adult person that my child talks to like no other. He doesn't really communicate. He'll either be by me and my husband, and he'll be like, "What do I have to say? I don't want to talk to this person." But with Kareem, she knows how to engage him. She reads him very well, just by his posture and all that stuff. So it's fine with us.
So I guess, yeah, if I'm seeing something on them, I just point it out. Yeah, even today, like, hey, what's that frown about? And you have to be really watching the screen really to make sure you don't miss, especially when it's hard to have. I think earlier today I had a session with 4 sisters, so it's kind of tough to to move and shift, but definitely um, you definitely can though.
Thanks, Corinne. Thanks, Cindy. So maybe intersecting with there, maybe just projecting Susan, or I see there's an aspect about size of the screen. So on the therapist end, uh, Corinne, maybe if you have any from a supervisor, from a provider recommendations, I'm guessing, I don't know, is it an assumption? Are you, I guess, prefer bigger screens, laptop or computer? So I'm guessing therapists would prefer probably not, a therapist probably shouldn't be using their phone because it'd be a smaller screen and you have a hard time. Would that be fair to say? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. If you have a desktop, I mean, to do telehealth, especially with share screening, for me, I'm not too tech savvy, but I find it so much easier if it's a desktop. Um, you know, um, I do let families know. I mean, we have to be prepared what they can do also. So, um, a lot of them, they only have their phone. So it does make it a little bit more difficult. But as a therapist, it's way easier with a desktop or a laptop. Um, uh, Especially if you're doing family therapy, you need to see everyone's faces and their reactions, and um, to me it's too hard to do on anything smaller than a desktop.
Thank you, Corinne. That's excellent. Um, Another question coming in: have you found adolescents feel safer with telehealth? They're able to share more details about themselves, or incidents or experiences question. So your reactions about that. Have you found it that adolescents, or maybe if I could even project on this anonymous question, have you found that adolescents or maybe certain types of families or subgroups, it's actually better to do telehealth, that they are more open than they would be in person?
No, I really took to telehealth, you guys. So I just felt like there was no difference. You know, I do have a little background in functioning family therapy, so I did that for 4 years. So I really don't see a difference in doing family therapy virtual versus in the home. I'm sure they can hide a little bit more virtually. That's why it's very important to really be watchful of everyone's reactions during the sessions, and do your best to address it there. A lot of point of processing, waiting instead of waiting for the next session. But yeah, for me personally, it was a pretty easy transition.
Cindy, what about you? What do you think about that?
I agree. It was a pretty smooth transition into it. My kiddo, he's pretty open, but like I said with Kareem, he really connects with her. So over telehealth or in person, as long as he gets to see her, he's fine.
Other questions or comments? Keep them coming in the bottom, sort of in the middle, but towards the right, bottom middle right-ish of your screen. There's a Q&A part. People could use that. That would be wonderful if they have other things. So anything else from? Oh, there we go. Questions are coming in. Also, CAMD staff, other panelists, feel free to jump in. Sorry, I'm just talking to to fill the space. One more question coming in from Samantha. What are your best tips for if you need to engage multiple adolescents at a time in person? I'm great, but online I always lose at least one or two.
For adolescents, I'm pretty old school, so I don't do any games online. So we use for adolescents, if I check it with the families first, what they have. So if they have Jenga, I'm doing Jenga on my side. If it's checkers, you know, anything like that. We did a lot with our agency. Right out the gate, we really spent the time on talking with the families and figuring out how we can do this. So it was the first couple of weeks, it was like dropping things off at the home. So if it was like coloring books or board games, cards, whatever we could, Legos, anything that we felt that we could engage the kids. And I have to use some of us are not too tech savvy, so we didn't want to spend a whole lot of time figuring out which games work or not, which we're so comfortable in the games that we already know. So, you know, I encouraged all the therapists to check in with the families and see what they have. And then for me, it was making sure that all my therapists had that. So if there were, you know, they have little ones, Candyland and things like that. I found that a lot of our girls that struggle with depression and anxiety. So if we did, like we're introducing like journaling or things like that, we screen share the journal book that we're working out of, and you know, getting canvases to them. So we're both, you know, they have an easel, we have an easel on our side. You know, and that's, you know, while we're doing that, that's when the talking story is going on. You know, we did the first 2 weeks when we moved into telehealth, we took all, you know, we met as a group twice a week and just sharing telesession ideas. And then so like we shared it on Wednesday, and then following week we're like, okay, how did it work? What was the barriers and things like that? And I found that to be super helpful. you know, for little kids, we do like mindfulness scavenger hunt, or grounding. And an important thing is to do is to like to teach. Like I know with Cindy, one of the things that we did was, you know, just really helping her guide, like, okay, I'm going to be teaching the little one a grounding kind of exercise. So I'm going to do it with you. And, so, you know, so when he's like all over the place, this can help, you know, re-engage and get him back in. And so it's like, 5 things they see, 4 things they feel, and then we practice like use of our tone and slowing it down, the pacing of it. And so I feel like it's kind of talking with your families, what works for them, what works for your kids. So, you know, what do you find that is, you know, talking about how we lose them, like, I can get 30 minutes in and then I'm losing track. Like, how can I re-engage your child? So, you know, always plan to check in with the family at least the last 10-15 minutes of a session, or the day after, you know, asking mom, hey, can I get a 50-minute conversation so I can kind of go over what our last session was with, you know, that's been super helpful for telehealth, because they're going to know better than us, really, how to keep our kids engaged. Talking to them when the best times it is to meet with the with the kid. That was something simple as that has been super helpful. Asking the family, really, like, oh, it's so distracting. Do you know, where can they meet that that, you know, the TV's not blaring, or, you know, just having that kind of conversation with the parents was super helpful for especially the adolescents, because they want their children to get help, and they want the engagement to happen. So they, you know, they'll be engaging in that conversation.
Thank you, Corinne. Looks like Leslie has something there uh, in the chat, a question / comment. Leslie, could I turn it to you for a little bit?
Yeah, Corinne, I mean, you know, I was a therapist for many years, but I haven't been for many years, and I'm not doing teletherapy. So in thinking about it, I just imagined that like doing parenting work with a parent would be fairly equivalent telehealth, or working with an adolescent who was pretty verbal, and you know, that the individual work would be pretty equivalent, but that you'd have to be much more creative. It would be harder with the younger kids. And I wonder if that's what you found.
That I have to be very,
So, or is it all just individual, I guess?
so, or are you asking if is it more or less more individual?
Yeah, is it just in general easier to do like the parenting work and the individual work with older kids by telehealth, and just more of a stretch with the younger kids?
I love family work, so it, for me personally, it has to go hand in hand. So at the meeting, the first meeting, it's really just letting the family, like, to have me, we have to do family, like that. It has to be. Has to be that way. With the little one, right? It's mostly parenting. With this one, we it worked out well. Out the gate, we did a lot of. We always do probably more parenting with the little ones, of course, but we still do. It's still okay. It's still capable of doing individual. We brought on an outpatient therapist. Halfway through, because that was always the plan, right out the gate. 6 months later, we're going to be closing our case, and so we, no, it's equal. I do just as much individual as I do parent and family. With the little guys, you're gonna do it. Yes, the little guys, you're gonna do more parenting than you are with the little one, because you're teaching them the skills. You're they're gonna practice the skills. You're gonna come back and check in how that skills went, right? And then hopefully 5-6 months later, you're just working on generalizing those skills with the parents, right? So, but for adolescents, I say it's equal. I personally don't meet with them individually more than just family. It's pretty equal.
I guess I'm thinking kind of about the future. So when we actually can do in person, I think we're not going to want to shelve telehealth, right? Because it's efficient and, it doesn't involve as much traveling, and there's just maybe some real advantages. But I'm thinking some of our treatment plans might be, well, we're going to meet twice on telehealth, and then I'm going to come to the home, and that you might pick different types of sessions to do on telehealth and different ones to do in person.
Absolutely, Leslie. Yeah, absolutely. Your homework check-in, your all of that can all be done on telehealth.
Right. Yeah.
Family therapy, to be honest, it is way easier in person, especially when you have a big family. I currently have someone that has like six of them, and so everyone is a part of it. So we're doing it on on telehealth now, but I found that with that particular family, I think, but then it lasts way longer. I saw that a difference. Family sessions can go on for quite some time in person versus on telehealth. But for the future, I definitely hope telehealth doesn't go away, because you definitely can do most of your parenting on there, your follow-ups, your homework check-in, all of that. That can just be telehealth. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on that briefly, because that is kind of the sense that I'm getting, just in terms of where we're going naturally through the course of things, but also, that feedback from the parent consumer survey kind of also shows that some people prefer in person and some people prefer telehealth. And I think the future is going to have to be a mix of all of these modalities kind of being used together to be cost efficient and flexible and meet the needs of the clients. And that's probably, it seems to me, where we're headed, to be kind of a world where we're doing a bit of all things.
Yeah, I found that the barriers for treatment in regards to parenting work schedules, it really decreased with the telehealth. Someone has like 2 jobs. I mean, it's not, well, that's for me personally. I don't know how everyone else thinks about that, but I saw a change in that for me personally, that wasn't much as a barrier because of the telehealth.
Makes sense.
There's just so many advantages to telehealth and to in-person. They both have their pros and cons.
Yeah.
The favorite part is you can come to work in your pajamas.
It's always nice.
Just kidding. Okay.
So maybe we got a couple minutes left, but maybe just bringing us out to a close, and sort of one last reminder about CEUs. So be on the lookout via email for whatever email you registered with. We're going to be looking to your if CEUs are interesting to you, then the time in session for today, as well as filling out the forthcoming survey, and then I'd love to turn it over to Corinne and or Cindy or Kurt or Leslie or somebody for any closing kind of thoughts, and just kind of bring us home, take home points, do's and don'ts. And then one last thing before that, just wanted to express on behalf of the Evidence-Based Services Committee, a deep gratitude and appreciation to Corinne and Cindy. Extra special gratitude and thank you for coming today. This is always the most, I think, resoundingly, people love to hear from families and therapists. So thank you very, very much. Very grateful for that. With that, any closing thoughts from anybody on the panel?
Well, I like to, I think I cheated because I used Cindy. She was really wonderful to work with, you guys. All that active ignoring was she probably wanted to choke my neck when I introduced that intervention to her. Like, nope, get back in there, Cindy. No, you're doing it wrong. But, they've met their goals where we actually was aiming to close on September 30th, but we wanted to keep it open a little longer so we can both participate in today's presentation, but they met all their treatment goals. And I find that to be pretty awesome to be able to do that over telehealth. They're wonderful to work with.
I think it is worth noting that Corinne is kind of a superhero therapist. I mean, Corinne is a world-class therapist, so it stands to reason that she's going to take to telemental health work very easily. She's highly, highly skilled. And then Cindy, thank you for, sharing your experience. I don't know you personally, but by every indication, you are also a superhero because you have a lot of skills and empathy, and you've done a lot of great work with Corinne. And so, I mean, this is, to me, yeah, obviously you two could be the poster kids for telemental health work, and so I appreciate you sharing. But there's probably some folks that it doesn't come as easy to, and so that's where I really thank Austin and Tristan for sharing all of those tips and tricks and things to optimize, because I do think in reality for some folks it is a bit harder than Corinne and Cindy make it seem. And so you've got to put in that effort to kind of do it right. And so I really appreciate that help that Austin and Tristan shared to kind of make it more doable for us non-superheroes.
All right, that seems like the perfect place to end. So a deep note of gratitude and appreciation again on behalf of everyone involved. Thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.